We start by seeing a large ship, and the spokesperson wishes a memorable journey for the passengers on this voyage, which is the last of the great ship, which has been in operation since 1950. The vessel will navigate the unique maritime route, considered calm, where the company has been sailing since World War II without any incidents. The spokesperson states that Captain Schaefer invites everyone to the banquet hall at the beginning of the night to introduce themselves and celebrate. Meanwhile, part of the crew talks among themselves and cleans the corridor. There is the youngest, named Brian, and the others known as George and Oscar, who is Brian's brother. They watch with interest two female passengers talking, not knowing that the mother, named Molly Evans, was a naval officer and is with her daughter Kendall. After they leave, the brothers talk, and Brian goes to get detergent. But meanwhile, Oscar and George discuss the social class of the women they just saw. Imagining that they are well off and possess valuable assets, they decide to plot something. George, beforehand, asks Oscar to restrain his brother because he might report them to the ship's management. Oscar states that this will not happen, so they settle on the plan. The doubt is about the recordings from the surveillance cameras, but George says that the observer Cyrus will help, but wants his cut of the heists. Back with the women, Molly confesses to her daughter that she sold the house, where memories of her deceased husband echoed throughout the place, so she left it behind. This makes her daughter sad and upset, as she imagined that her mother would never do this. Knowing that her mother wanted to meet the captain because he once saved her husband's life, she urges her mother to enjoy, although she would not participate in the celebrations. In the family's room, George and Oscar check the furniture to see if they can find something of value when Brian enters the room and rejects his brother's actions. He becomes furious and worried, as he had the opportunity to get the job for him, but he is acting with bad intentions. While the young man scolds his co-workers, Kendall enters the room and sees the scene of the men inside. Consequently, she is suspicious and imagines the worst, so she runs in fear for her life. George chases her, and the others follow, knowing that the man could hurt the young woman. They end up going up to the deck, where George captures the young Kendall. He tells his friends that there can be no witnesses, but the others do not desire this. Unfortunately, the man, fearing being discovered and then arrested, will throw the young woman into the sea. Brian tries to prevent this action, but the three of them end up falling into the ocean. He and the young Kendall become unconscious while George struggles in the water. Meanwhile, Oscar only observes the scene, fearing to do something, but he quickly runs to Cyrus and confirms that the cameras are off, but does not tell where the others are. In the sea, George, not knowing how to swim well, cries for help, but nobody hears his pleas. It is then, in this moment of despair, that he discovers that these waters are not tranquil at all, as sharks soon appear. One of the large ones starts attacking the man and quickly takes him to his death. Seconds later, Kendall regains consciousness and nearly sinks. Realizing she is in danger in the sea and surrounded by dangerous sharks, she surfaces and screams in the hope that someone on the ship will hear her. Seeing the fins approaching and the ship moving away from the site of the fall, despair takes over and only her screams echo in the area. Meanwhile, inside the ship, Molly goes to the honors hall and meets Captain Schaefer there. The man asks about the woman's daughter, but she denies her daughter's upset and says she was just seasick and that soon she would join the others. When Molly goes to the room to look for her daughter, unaware of what happened, she finds only the empty room with the drawers overturned. She leaves and goes in search of Kendall, and outside, meets Oscar, who is trying to maintain things as if nothing had happened. Molly asks for help to find her daughter, and he apprehensively accepts the invitation, even knowing the young woman's fate. The young Kendall is living in despair in the ocean. Fortunately, she spots a small island nearby and hurries to swim to the location to shelter from the predators that surround the area. At that moment, young Brian also wakes up and finds himself in danger, but also notices that young Kendall is nearly reached by a shark, as she struggles in the water. The young man urges her to stay still while he stirs the water to attract the sea beast. It works and gives Kendall a chance to swim to the island safely. However, Brian ends up getting bitten and struggles to escape the shark. When Kendall reaches the sand of the small island, she, in panic, moves as far away from the sea as she can. Fortunately, young Brian also reaches the island, and the shark cannot reach them. When they unite with Kendall, she helps him and partially staunches the bite wound he suffered, while his leg injury is not serious. Both are now adrift on this small island, without food, without water, and without protection from the sun. Offshore is the ship that, with the captain, unaware of the passenger's fall, moved on. The search for the young woman continues, but the mother wants to inform the captain quickly, although Oscar fears and asks to search on the lower deck, as the ship is large. Seeing that she would follow him, he asks for her identification as a passenger for better investigation and search. Molly then enters her room, but quickly realizes that she will be locked in there. She forces the door and quickly overpowers Oscar. Molly knows that the man is hiding something he does not want to reveal, and then inflicts pain on him to extract what he knows. Desperate and afraid of retaliation, he tells her that the young woman, along with 2 of her friends, fell into the sea, and fearing being arrested and expelled, he hid this from everyone. Molly takes him to Captain Schaefer so that what happened can be revealed to the leader of the ship. Back on the island, a few minutes later, the young people talk, and Kendall is furious with Brian. But he says he tried to help the young woman and explains what was happening in his mother's room. After the explanation, he tries to immobilize the young woman's leg, which seems to be broken. However, due to the pain, he leaves it as it is. Next, he looks around at the small school of sharks surrounding the island, knowing that the tide will rise, and they may become food for the beasts. On the ship, in Captain Schaefer's cabin, Molly enters and says that her daughter fell into the sea and they need to rescue her. The captain goes to the surveillance cabin to gather more information and discovers that they are ahead of the location of the fall, approximately 10 miles. He also learns that the trio at the time of the fall was united and questions what was happening. However, the mother, worried about her daughter, asks for the search to be expedited and for the Coast Guard to be notified. The captain states that, before contacting the Coast Guard, they will first follow the standard search and rescue protocol. Then, they will dock the ship, and a team will go out in a boat to search. Molly says she will go with the team, as she is capable of doing so. She then says who she really is, and introduces herself as the widow of the late First Lieutenant Frank, which makes Captain Schaefer happy. Accepting the request, Schaefer states that the team will go on the Achilles, the only boat available for search and rescue. Oscar wishes to go with the team, but the captain denies him and also punishes him by threatening to take away his job. Back on the island, the 2 young people look for a way to signal. Fortunately, Kendall has a small bag that she managed to cling to, which contains a lighter, but it is damaged by the water, and even removing the spark piece, Brian cannot light a fire. He then tries using the lenses from his sunglasses, but for Kendall, that won't work. The tide is rising, and with that, the sharks may reach the young people. Suddenly, and by a narrow margin, one of these beasts nearly bites Kendall's leg, but she is rescued by Brian. In the control and surveillance cabin, Oscar asks Cyrus for help to place him on the search team. The controller says he will do it, but asks him never to ask anything more, as he does not want to get into trouble. After Oscar leaves, Cyrus, fearing being arrested at the end of the rescue, decides to change the search route and alters the coordinates on the Achilles' onboard computer without the lifeguards Marcus and Abby noticing. Before departing, the captain hands a signal gun to Molly and wishes her good luck, unaware that Oscar has dressed in one of the lifeguards' uniforms to go along. Back with the young people, Brian starts the process of immobilizing Kendall's broken leg again, and even with pain, the young girl allows the action. Meanwhile, the rescue boat begins its journey, with Oscar wearing a mask to avoid being discovered. Minutes later, on the island, Brian offers some small oysters for Kendall to eat. However, he uses one of them to prepare a bait to fish for some fish, using parts of his pants and the frame of Kendall's glasses to make an improvised fishing line. It does not take long for him to catch a fish, but shortly afterward, a shark emerges in the small waves that almost reaches him on the sand. Out at sea, still searching for the youth, Molly is anxious, as she believes they are not following the right path. Suddenly, the vessel is hit by one of the sharks, and with the shock and agitation, the navigation and coordinate computer falls into the sea. While Molly tries to communicate by radio with the captain, one of the lifeguards jumps into the sea to try and seal the boat's leak. Marcus, during the operation, gets hurt, and his blood mixes with the water. He must do this quickly, as there are many hungry sharks in the area. Inside the boat, Molly talks to the captain and asks for location guidance. However, Schaefer cannot find them on the radar. When Marcus finishes the repair, he surfaces to board, but suddenly one of the beasts bites him and pulls him down, leaving no chance for him to be saved. The captain hears everything over the radio and, in the boat, the crew witnesses the horrible scene of their deceased companion. Molly becomes angry with the masked man for not helping to save the friend. However, she soon discovers that it is Oscar, the reason they are there. Molly speaks again with Schaefer and asks the captain for help, and he goes to talk to Cyrus. He states that he has already informed the Coast Guard, but the response will only come in an hour due to the helicopter not being available. A few minutes later, on the island, night is falling, and seeing that the sharks are still there, Brian begins throwing stones into the sea. After the ineffective action, he sits next to Kendall. Out at sea, the search team is adrift, unable to decide where to go, as they could become more lost than they already are. With the clouds covering the starry sky, unfortunately, Molly cannot locate herself using the stars, and even though Oscar insists on leaving, Molly, with experience, says they will remain still. After a few minutes, the little light from the moon reflects through the clouds. Oscar reveals that the Earth's natural satellite is waxing, and based on this, Molly indicates where they should go and informs the captain she is heading west. On the island, Brian struggles to create just a spark and generate fire, to warm themselves and create a light signal. However, when he turns around, he realizes that Kendall is unconscious. He moves Kendall away from the water and then tries to wake his new friend, but the young girl does not regain consciousness. Meanwhile, in the boat, Molly and Oscar calmly discuss when they will reunite with their families. Suddenly, the boat is flipped over by a new shark attack. Oscar and Abby surface, and despite being frightened, try to right the vessel while Molly dives to retrieve gear from the backpack. The large sharks surround the area, waiting for the right moment to attack them. Molly surfaces and helps the two to overturn the boat, but it is a difficult and time-consuming task. Oscar and the retired naval officer go one way together, while Abby stays on the other side. Suddenly, one of the large sea predators approaches and quickly attacks the young lifeguard, leading her to her death. Fearing being attacked, Molly tells Oscar to remain still. Inside the ship, Cyrus informs the captain that the Coast Guard has arrived at the area of the passenger's fall, but no further information has been provided. We soon discover that the man is doing everything to cover up his lack of help. He probably did not notify the Coast Guard, knowing that with the rescue of Brian and his brother, he would carry part of the blame to himself, which would lead to his arrest. He then decides to pack his bags to flee. Back on the flipped boat, Oscar questions the fact that they will be the next to become shark food, but Molly tries to calm him. She tells him they will flip the boat, but the man does not believe it, as it will be more impossible than before with one less. However, Molly insists she has a plan to overturn the boat. On the island, fortunately, the young Kendall awakens, and Brian is pleased with this, but he says the tide is rising and is almost upon them. He also says the sharks know they are there defenseless. Kendall fears the situation, but with Brian's encouraging words, she cheers up and rekindles the hope of getting out of there alive. Under the waters of the sea, the danger is imminent, but Molly patiently awaits the right moment to act. Noticing the opportunity when the sharks are far away, she grabs a rope and ties it to the boat for Oscar to pull, while using her weight as support. The plan works, and the boat rights itself. After the two are safely inside the vessel, Molly thanks Oscar for what he is doing, as it means he is remorseful for what he has done and deserves a second chance. When he is about to start the engine, one of the beasts suddenly emerges from the waters and knocks him back into the sea. Molly desperately tries to save him, bringing him back to the boat, but the shark continues its attack and bites the man. With blood everywhere, another large shark appears and finishes Oscar off, destroying his hope of finding his brother. Back on the ship, the captain contacts Cyrus for more information about the Coast Guard, but he does not respond. The captain then goes to his cabin and does not find him there. Unbeknownst to him, Cyrus is already moving away from the ship in another boat. The captain contacts the Coast Guard and then discovers that no contact has been made with them about the earlier incident. The captain, without wasting any time, demands an immediate search. He then contacts Cyrus, asking him to return to the ship and accept his punishment. However, he states he will not surrender to the authorities and desires another fate. He jumps into the sea, and soon large sharks attack him and destroy him. Minutes later, on the island, The water is already touching the feet of the young people, and when Brian asks Kendall to try to stand up, despite her broken leg, she tries, but by doing so, she faints again. Soon, an aircraft flies over the area, but as there is no visible signal for help, they pass over the young people without noticing them. Back on Molly's boat, she finally sees the stars. With this, the hope of finding her daughter becomes tangible, and she quickly starts the boat's engine and departs. However, the engine does not work for long, and soon breaks down completely. She insists on starting it, but there is no success. She then frees the oars, but the movements attract one of the large sharks, which tries to attack her, but bravely she fights it off with the oar until she scares it away. Back on the island, the young people are already partially submerged and surrounded by sharks. One of the beasts separates young Brian from Kendall, who is still unconscious, and pulls him to the depths. Fortunately, the young man carries a stone in his pocket and punches the shark in the eye, making it retreat. Seeing his friend drowning, Brian quickly swims towards her and brings her up from the water. The young girl finally wakes up and panics at seeing her current situation. Brian tries to calm her, stating that the beasts do not swim in shallow waters, but soon this statement becomes false, with one of the sharks pushing the young woman to the side. Before long, the beast bites the girl's leg and drags her into the depths. Fortunately, her mother is already near the location and hears Brian screaming. She quickly approaches and jumps in to try to rescue her daughter. She sees the shark dragging her Kendall deeper. This is when she grabs a stone from the bottom and attacks the creature's eye. After the beast releases the young girl, Molly brings her daughter to the surface and places her inside the boat. When Brian prepares to climb aboard, the shark approaches him, but acting quickly, Molly grabs the signal gun and shoots it into the creature's mouth, killing it. After a few minutes, they are rescued by helicopters and brought back to the ship, and the young people are taken to the infirmary for treatment. Meanwhile, Molly talks to the captain, who reveals, after witnessing Molly's bravery, that it was her husband who once saved him, and he owes that to him. Subsequently, she speaks with young Brian, thanking him for helping to save her daughter's life, and also mentions that Oscar had the courage to try to rescue him and would be happy that his brother is alive. In the next scene, we see mother and daughter who can be together again, returning to a peaceful life after going through terror at sea.